Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The tension in Genoa City had reached a boiling point, and it all culminated in a moment that left everyone gasping, frozen in disbelief, and whispering the phrase that would soon be echoed in shock across the town. "Outrage, my God." The setting was the luxurious and tension-laden corridors of the Newman estate, where secrets, lies and betrayals often played out like a dangerous dance, each step more precarious than the last. On that fateful day, Phyllis, known for her sharp tongue and even sharper instincts, had reached the limits of her patience with Tessa, whose recent manipulations, petty schemes and careless betrayals had not only tested Phyllis's temper but threatened to unravel the delicate fabric of her own carefully curated world. Tessa had done it again, her words dripping with condescension, her tone suffused with the arrogance that had always made Phyllis's skin crawl, and her latest scheme had crossed a line that could no longer be ignored. The air was electric with tension as Phyllis's eyes narrowed, her jaw set, and the room seemed to shrink around them, everyone in the vicinity sensing that something monumental was about to occur. And then in a sudden, almost cinematic instant, Phyllis's hand shot out with precision and force, landing squarely on Tessa's cheek in a slap that echoed like thunder through the room, reverberating off the walls and through the ears of every onlooker. It was a slap that was not just physical but symbolic, a manifestation of every frustration, every betrayal, and every simmering grievance that had been building between them for weeks, months, perhaps even years, and it carried with it an intensity that left Tessa reeling, her eyes wide with disbelief, her hand instinctively rising to touch her stinging face as the reality of the moment sank in. "Oh, my God," Phyllis exclaimed, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger, disbelief and raw emotion, each word punctuating the depth of her outrage. But she wasn't done. In the same breath, she uttered three shocking words that would set off a chain reaction of tension, anger and confrontation that no one could have anticipated. "You're unbelievable, Tessa." The words were sharp, cutting through the air like a knife, precise in their delivery and devastating in their effect. Tessa's mouth opened and closed, searching for a retort, but no words could come. The impact of Phyllis's slap and verbal attack had left her momentarily speechless, and for once, she was confronted with a reality in which her manipulations had failed, her games had been exposed, and her arrogance had been met with an unflinching, unapologetic force. The room seemed to hold its breath, everyone waiting to see what would happen next, knowing that in Genoa City, one act of confrontation rarely stayed contained. And sure enough, Daniel, who had been quietly observing the escalating tension from the doorway, could contain his anger no longer. His face flushed with fury, his fists clenched instinctively at his sides, and his voice trembled with a mixture of rage, betrayal and protective instinct as he stepped forward, his every movement radiating a sense of imminent confrontation. "That was completely uncalled for," he shouted, his tone sharp and piercing, reverberating through the room and demanding immediate attention. "Phyllis, you can't just..." He paused, the words catching in his throat as he struggled to temper the storm of emotions swirling inside him. But Phyllis, ever resolute, stood her ground, her eyes blazing with a mixture of defiance and righteousness, refusing to back down even in the face of Daniel's evident fury. "Daniel," she said, her voice low but steady, "this isn't about me. This is about Tessa and the fact that she crossed a line that cannot be ignored, that will not be tolerated." Daniel's anger only intensified, his voice rising as he tried to process the sequence of events, the slap, the words, and the implications of Phyllis's actions. "I don't care what she did. You can't just hit someone, Phyllis. This isn't the solution. You're supposed to set an example, not escalate the chaos." His words hung in the air, echoing off the ornate walls as Tessa, recovering slightly from the shock, allowed a smug, almost calculated smirk to cross her face, which only served to further inflame Daniel's protective instincts. He stepped closer to Phyllis, ensuring she understood that while he admired her courage and passion, the line she had crossed was dangerous and could have serious repercussions, not just personally but socially and legally, in a town where reputations were currency and tempers were volatile. Phyllis's mind, however, was a whirlwind of justification and pent-up anger. She thought back to the countless ways Tessa had undermined her, manipulated situations for personal gain, and attempted to turn allies against her in a web of deception that seemed almost designed to push her to this very breaking point. Each memory flared in her mind with vivid intensity, fueling the righteousness of her actions and giving weight to the slap that had reverberated through the room. Meanwhile, the bystanders, some of whom had known Phyllis and Tessa for years, watched in stunned silence, unsure whether to intervene, mediate, or simply witness the unfolding drama, which was unlike any confrontation they had ever seen between the two women. The incident also triggered a ripple of whispers and shocked murmurs throughout Genoa City, as news of the altercation quickly spread, with residents discussing the shocking words, the slap, and Daniel's intense reaction, all of which added layers of tension and anticipation to the already volatile atmosphere. And in the midst of all this, Daniel's anger began to shift from immediate outrage to a more strategic response, as he realized that while Phyllis had acted in the heat of the moment, there were deeper issues at play, issues that required careful consideration, confrontation, and perhaps even reconciliation if the delicate relationships within their intertwined social circles were to be preserved. Yet, as he approached Tessa, whose smugness now mixed with a hint of fear, he couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, to protect those he cared about, to confront wrongdoing, and to navigate the complex web of lies, betrayals, and emotions that defined life in Genoa City. Phyllis, noticing Daniel's struggle to contain his fury, softened slightly, though her stance remained firm. She understood his protective instincts, his desire for justice, and the intensity of his reaction, yet she also recognized that sometimes, words alone could not convey the magnitude of betrayal, manipulation, and deceit, and that in rare, explosive moments only action, unflinching, undeniable action, could communicate the depth of one's feelings and the seriousness of the offense. The shock of Phyllis's words, 3 devastatingly impactful words, lingered in the air, resonating with everyone in the room, echoing in the minds of the audience, and cementing a pivotal moment in the ongoing drama of the young and the restless. In that charged silence, everyone understood that the events of that day would have long-lasting ramifications. Alliances would shift, relationships would be tested, and the fragile veneer of civility in Genoa City would be forever altered. The slap, the 3 shocking words, and Daniel's visible anger were not just isolated events. They were catalysts, sparking a series of confrontations, confessions, and reckonings that would ripple across every corner of the city, touching lives, exposing truths, and forcing each character to confront their own morality, loyalty, and capacity for forgiveness. And as Phyllis's gaze met Daniel's, a silent understanding passed between them, a recognition of shared frustration, mutual desire for justice, and an acknowledgement that in a world as tangled and treacherous as theirs, moments of raw honesty, no matter how explosive, were sometimes necessary to cut through the web of deception, bring hidden truths to light, and force everyone involved to face the reality of their choices, actions, and the consequences that inevitably followed. The moment was electric, unforgettable, and devastating in its implications, a perfect storm of emotion, drama, and raw intensity that exemplified everything the young and the restless was renowned for. Unflinching drama, complex relationships, shocking revelations, and the ever-present undercurrent of moral ambiguity that kept viewers on the edge of their seats, hearts racing, and minds endlessly speculating on what would happen next, how each character would respond, and who would emerge victorious, defeated, or irrevocably changed by the unforgettable clash that had just unfolded in that small, tension-filled room in the heart of Genoa City. Every heartbeat, every glance, every syllable spoken or unsaid, was charged with consequence, and as the camera metaphorically zoomed in on the stunned faces of all present, it was clear that Phyllis's slap, her 3 shocking words, and Daniel's unrestrained anger had forever altered the trajectory of lives, relationships, and the ongoing narrative of intrigue, betrayal, and emotional upheaval that had become the lifeblood of the young and the restless, ensuring that the reverberations of this explosive moment would be felt long after the echo of that fateful slap had faded into the annals of Genoa City history. As the echo of Phyllis's slap lingered in the room, time seemed to stretch, moments expanding into an almost unbearable tension that weighed heavily on every soul present, each person caught in the gravity of what had just transpired. Tessa, still clutching her reddened cheek, struggled to compose herself, her breathing shallow, her mind a chaotic whirlwind of disbelief, humiliation, and seething indignation. She had never experienced confrontation quite like this. Phyllis's actions were not merely a reprimand. They were an unfiltered declaration, a public stripping away of pretense that left Tessa exposed in the most vulnerable way imaginable. She felt the hot sting of embarrassment mingled with the sharp edge of anger, a combination that threatened to erupt into tears or retaliation, though neither would come immediately. The room itself seemed to respond to the intensity of the moment, as if the walls of the Newman estate, which had witnessed countless confrontations, betrayals, and scandals, could almost feel the reverberations of human emotion pulsing through them. Every object, from the ornate furniture to the carefully chosen decor, became a silent witness to a scene that would be talked about for weeks, if not months, as a turning point in the intricate web of Genoa city relationships. Daniel, still brimming with the fire of righteous indignation, could barely restrain himself from stepping forward and physically confronting Tessa, though he knew that doing so would only escalate the situation further. His protective instincts warred with his sense of reason, and he felt a desperate need to assert authority, to defend those he loved, and to make it clear that Tessa's actions and provocations would no longer be tolerated. Phyllis, sensing his inner turmoil, cast a subtle but firm glance at him, one that simultaneously conveyed solidarity and a reminder to maintain composure. She wanted Daniel to understand that this was not a situation to be solved with brute force or shouting. It was a calculated, intentional moment designed to puncture Tessa's arrogance and compel accountability in a way words alone could not achieve. And yet Daniel's pulse raced as he measured the intensity of Phyllis's emotions, realizing that her act of physical confrontation, though startling, was also rooted in a deep, personal investment, a long history of betrayal, manipulation, and the constant undercurrent of tension that had defined her interactions with Tessa for months. This understanding did little to cool the fire in his chest, but it did give him insight into the complexity of human reactions in high-stakes situations, teaching him that sometimes moral clarity existed not in the letter of societal rules but in the immediacy of emotional truth. Around them, other observers, friends, family, and bystanders drawn by the unmistakable aura of drama, witnessed the volatile mix of anger, righteousness, and wounded pride. Their reactions varied. Some were frozen in shock, unable to process the magnitude of what had occurred. Others whispered nervously, their voices carrying speculation, judgment, and curiosity as they tried to make sense of a confrontation that defied easy categorization. The whispers spread quickly, like wildfire through the social fabric of Genoa City, carrying with them both sympathy for Phyllis's courage and concern for the escalation of conflict. Meanwhile, Tessa's internal dialogue was a storm of contradictions. She thought about the choices that had led her to this moment, the small manipulations, the half-truths, the sly deceptions, all of which had seemed harmless in isolation but now coalesced into a tapestry of exposure that left her vulnerable, humiliated, and struggling to maintain her composure. She recognized, even in the heat of her embarrassment, that Phyllis's slap had a precision that cut deeper than mere physical pain. It was a symbolic gesture, a public acknowledgement that certain lines could not be crossed, and that reckoning, no matter how delayed, was inevitable. Tessa's thoughts then turned to consequences, as the reality of Daniel's anger settled like a weight upon her shoulders. She understood that this confrontation would not exist in isolation. It would ripple outward, influencing future alliances, shifting loyalties, and altering perceptions in ways she could not yet fully predict. Each interaction, each relationship would now carry the shadow of this moment, a reminder that actions have consequences, and that the delicate balance of power in Genoa City was fragile, easily disrupted by a single act of emotion-fueled justice. Daniel, his mind still a tempest of fury and protective instincts, began to consider the broader implications of Phyllis's confrontation. He realized that while her actions were extraordinary, they were also a wake-up call, a signal that the rules governing social interactions in Genoa City were fluid, responsive, and often dictated by emotional truth rather than abstract principles of civility. He reflected on the moral complexities of the moment, acknowledging that while a slap was extreme, it had exposed deeper truths about human behavior, accountability, and the necessity of confronting wrongdoing in a way that commands attention and ensures recognition. This intellectualization did little to quell the immediate anger, but it allowed him a measure of perspective, preparing him for the conversations, explanations, and potential conflicts that would inevitably follow. For Tessa, the psychological aftermath was immediate and punishing. The sting of the slap was mirrored by a deeper, more resonant pain, The awareness that her social standing, her influence, and her carefully constructed persona had been challenged in a manner that could not easily be undone. She recognized the permanence of the moment, the indelible mark left not just on her cheek but on her reputation, and she grappled with the humiliation, indignation, and self-recrimination that accompanied the realization of vulnerability. At the same time, a seed of introspection was planted, a hesitant acknowledgement that perhaps her actions, manipulations, and disregard for the feelings and boundaries of others had consequences beyond immediate gratification. Tessa's usual defenses, a mixture of charm, deflection, and strategic calculation, faltered in the face of Phyllis's unyielding moral force, leaving her both exposed and, paradoxically, confronted with an opportunity for growth. The scene in the Newman estate, tense, charged, and electric with emotion, had become a microcosm of the broader human experience. A collision of anger, morality, power, and vulnerability, each element interacting in a way that was as unpredictable as it was inevitable. Phyllis's slap and her 3 shocking words were more than just a moment of confrontation. They were a crystallization of history, memory, and relational dynamics, each infused with the weight of past grievances, unspoken resentments, and the cumulative impact of years of human interaction. The room, still vibrating with residual tension, became a stage on which the drama of human emotion, societal expectation, and personal morality played out with relentless intensity. Daniel, now caught between the immediacy of emotional response and the necessity of strategic thinking, wrestled with the dual challenge of supporting Phyllis while containing his own fury. He understood that every subsequent action, word, and decision would be scrutinized, interpreted, and potentially weaponized in the ongoing chess game of Genoa City relationships. His responsibility extended beyond the immediate moment, encompassing the preservation of social bonds, the management of conflict, and the maintenance of personal integrity in a context defined by emotional volatility and high stakes. Tessa, meanwhile, was forced to navigate the dual realities of humiliation and reflection, recognizing that her behavior had provoked a response that was at once shocking, justified, and irrevocable. She grappled with the recognition that her social acumen, manipulative skills, and interpersonal strategies, while often effective, could falter in the face of someone who combined moral clarity with emotional courage. The shock of the slap, the piercing precision of the 3 words, and Daniel's palpable anger coalesced into a powerful narrative of cause and effect, a moment in which human behavior, ethics, and emotion intersected in a manner that defied simplistic categorization. Around them, the witnesses of the confrontation continued to process the event, some with awe at Phyllis's courage, others with concern for the escalating conflict, and yet others with a voyeuristic fascination with the raw, unfiltered display of emotion. Conversations erupted in hushed tones, speculation spread like wildfire, and the reverberations of the incident extended far beyond the walls of the estate, touching lives, influencing perceptions, and shaping the ongoing drama of Genoa City in ways that were unpredictable, complex, and enduring. In the quiet moments following the confrontation, Phyllis allowed herself a brief pause, a moment to center her emotions and reflect on the act she had committed. She understood the risks inherent in a physical confrontation, the potential for misinterpretation, and the consequences that could ripple outward through her personal and professional life. Yet she also recognized the necessity of the act, the moral imperative that compelled her to act decisively in the face of repeated provocation and manipulation. Daniel, observing her, felt a complex mixture of admiration, frustration, and apprehension. He saw in her actions the embodiment of courage, integrity, and moral clarity, tempered by the unpredictability and volatility that often accompanies human emotion in high-stakes scenarios. He realized that while he might have chosen a different path, the impact of her decisions could not be denied, and the ethical and relational consequences would require careful navigation in the days, weeks, and months to come. Tessa, processing the moment, oscillated between shock, anger, and reluctant recognition of the moral force that had been applied to her actions. She understood, perhaps for the first time in a deeply personal and visceral way, that actions carry consequences, that arrogance and manipulation can be met with unyielding resistance, and that the social and emotional dynamics of Genoa City were governed not just by charm, cunning, and strategy, but by moral courage, emotional intelligence, and the willingness to act decisively when boundaries are crossed. The incident, now cemented in the collective consciousness of those present, would serve as a touchstone for future interactions, a reference point for judgments, alliances, and personal strategies, and a vivid example of the ways in which human emotion, morality, and social dynamics intersect in complex, often unpredictable ways. Every glance, every subtle movement, every word exchanged in the aftermath would carry the weight of that moment, infusing future interactions with tension, caution, and heightened awareness. The slap, the 3 words, and Daniel's anger had become more than a single act of confrontation. They had become a narrative pivot, a moment in which the trajectories of multiple lives shifted simultaneously, propelled by the raw force of human emotion, moral conviction, and relational complexity. And as the room slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, the tension lingering like an electric current in the air, each character was left to grapple with the implications of what had transpired, the lessons to be learned, the alliances to be reconsidered, and the ongoing drama that defined life in Genoa City, a drama in which every action, every word, and every emotional expression carried the potential to alter lives, expose truths, and shape destinies in ways that were as profound as they were unavoidable. The incident, while shocking in its immediate impact, was also transformative, revealing the depths of character, the consequences of manipulation, and the enduring power of courage, justice, and moral clarity in a world defined by deception, intrigue, and emotional complexity. It underscored the reality that in Genoa City, as in life itself, the intersections of anger, love, betrayal, and righteousness are rarely neat, often explosive, and always consequential, ensuring that the ripples of this singular moment, the slap, the 3 words, and the visible fury of Daniel, would resonate long into the future, affecting relationships, decisions, and the ongoing drama in ways that no one could fully predict, control, or escape.